Hey everybody, this is Mike with the One Stop Co-op Shop, and today I'm reviewing Avatar: The Last Airbender Aang's Destiny, a cooperative deck-building game for 1 to 4 players. And disclaimer, I received a review copy of this one. In Avatar: Aang's Destiny, you start out with a starter deck of cards. You'll have generally 5 a turn, and like many deck builders, you are playing them to get basically money to purchase new cards, as well as attack to defeat enemies. You progress through a series of boxes based around the 3 seasons of the television show. And in each of those scenarios, you're completing objectives that match directly up with the adventures of the Avatar gang from the cartoon, while also defeating enemies, trying to keep this boat from progressing too far. And to do that, like in many deck builders, you'll be upgrading your deck with bending cards and allies and all kinds of fun stuff. So let's get into it, but I'm going to do this review a little bit differently. Instead of doing the 5-point thing, I'm just going to talk about the game overall. And then, as many of you requested this, I'm going to discuss how it compares to the previous game in the same series with basically the same mechanics, which is Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. So let's start out with the non-comparison part for those who've never played Hogwarts Battle and talk about the game. So I'm just going to kind of travel around the board and talk about each of the mechanics in turn. So first of all, this little tracking token that moves along. A lot of the villains are going to advance this. These fire cards you draw on your turn are going to advance it. And as it gets to later spots, you're going to be drawing more and more of these cards, and they might advance it even further. But many cards in the game, including in some characters' starter decks, will push the boat back. So how does this work as a sort of timer and tension builder? Not that great. So you're supposed to always start at the 1 space, and even on the harder scenarios, it takes quite a while before you start getting to drawing 2 and drawing 3 cards. And if you manage stuff well and just kind of keep it behind there, then it never ramps up, it never gets tougher. I will say it depends greatly how tough this is on which villains you draw early, because if you get ones that are moving the boat consistently, before you have built an attack engine with your deck building, then, sometimes this will actually advance to where things are challenging. But yeah, in the many games I've played of this has rarely been an issue, which just means that the game doesn't feel that tough. And one of the other major things you're managing is your character's health. But if a character gets stunned, you just lose a couple cards, so you have a weaker turn the next turn. And the boat advances a single space. So like all this rigmarole of trying to keep your health up, it doesn't really end up mattering that much because the boat is just not moving that quickly. Now, I will note it's an extremely easy house rule to just start the boat on a later space and kind of amp up the tension from the beginning, although I think that's likely to kind of push things too far in the other direction and have the game end before you really get rolling. So I don't know, it's not really a tension building, game ending mechanic that I enjoy. I think it's fairly flawed. And as for the objectives, these are unique to each box, and they very accurately model some of the key moments in the Avatar saga. My kids and I have watched Avatar: The Last Airbender a ton of times, and we recognize all of these, and I appreciate these. They're fun. They do add some nice variety and also obviously a lot of theme to the different boxes you're playing, and often they require spending the money resource, which is called purpose, to progress, as opposed to the enemies, which are clearly going to require attacking. So I like that these will often give you something else to spend your purpose on if you're not trying to buy the cards that are currently for offer in the market. And then they give you little reward cards and things as you go. Now, a minor complaint with this one, these reward cards often get like shuffled into these other decks in the game and then become used. So if you want to kind of reset your campaign and play things again, it's a little bit annoying to track down the specific cards that you've been rewarded in previous scenarios and then like get them ready in this deck to be rewarded again. But that's a minor complaint. I think this works well. I mean, clearly the replay is not amazing if you replay the same scenario because you're going to see the exact same objective cards in a row. But since everything else is changing, the villains you're fighting, the cards you're building, and that kind of stuff, I think it still works well. Now, speaking of the villains and these event cards you're flipping, they do have pretty interesting effects. They'll sometimes punish different types of characters or punish you for having certain types of cards. And in later scenarios, you'll have 3 of them up, so you really have to kind of pick and choose who you want to target faster. And there are cards that'll like put them to the bottom of the deck so you can deal with them later if they're too tough. So I think that's pretty good, although I will say that, especially in later scenarios where there's a lot of villains, sometimes the game just kind of devolves into building up attack and kill, and it sometimes overstays its welcome slightly with a lot of villains. And then a small complaint for these event cards, you add more and more as you progress through the campaign. And, this kind of goes back to my point about the boat movement. At the beginning of the campaign, a whole bunch of the cards, like a large number of them, move the boat a whole lot. But as you move other cards, most of them don't move the boat that much. So it almost feels like as you level up this deck, you're actually slowing down the enemy progression towards winning the game. So again, it's a little bit of a weird balance. But these are fine. They do have some like fun effects that that force you to discard things and do other things with your deck or hand. And the villains can be a fun challenge as you're trying to deal with the objectives. Now, how about the deck building? Now, which elements are available will change based on which scenario you're in. Right now, I'm showing what would be available in like scenarios 3 to 5 or 2 to 5. I forget when Earth shows up. And there's some really cool things here I don't think I've seen in other deck builders. My favorite one is that while you have 2 spots for each bending element and then 4 spots for generic cards, anytime the same card shows up, you just stack them on top of each other. Like if I had 3 stone levitations, they would all go there. So you never have 2 of the same cards showing, so your options are limited. You never have like 2 or 3 or 4 of the same cards showing over here. You might end up with like a stack of cheap cards, but you'll always have 4 unique cards here and 2 unique cards per element. So it's really nice, stops that problem that some deck builders have where like the market can get clogged with the same kind of stuff. Now, as for the actual deck building, it is a mixed bag for sure. Here's why. So you've got these bending cards, and if your character is able to bend that specific element, like Aang here can bend air and water at this point in his journey, then you get to use the entire bending card, the top and the bottom. If you don't have that element, you only get to use the top effect, which is generally really weak, which sounds pretty cool, but here's the problem. They made the balance of the bending cards, in my experience, so much stronger than these generic cards. So here, let's see if I can find an example. Like here you go. This Oyaji ally guy. He gives you 1 attack, and if you defeat an enemy this turn, anybody gets to heal 2. Compared to Stone Levitation, just a basic like 3 or 4 copies in the deck stone card, this lets you get 1 money, lets you get 1 attack, and draw a replacement card if you're an earthbender. And that tends to be how things go. Like if you're a bender, I don't know why you would almost ever not buy these cards. Like when we played, this was 90 to 95% of what we bought, and that was a tiny amount. Usually we buy like some allies that let you get into elements. We'll get to that in a second. That part is really cool. But yeah, so I'm not saying that's unfun or bad because we enjoyed buying the bending cards and they made us feel super powerful, but it's just something to note that the balance again feels off and you're sort of very heavily pushed towards certain things. And if your character like can mainly only use earth bending, then you're probably only going to buy a very small subset of cards, so things can get a little bit samey. Additionally, this is sort of a personal preference, but I like deck builders that give you a lot of culling, and this game has no culling. You can't get rid of cards from your deck. Literally the only thing, at least that I've seen, is the helping hand card. Each character starts with 2 of them, and you can get 1 progress, or you can remove it from play to get 3 progress, so it lets you like kind of get a big burst of money to buy a really good card. And then those are taken out of the deck. But besides that, nope, you're just kind of building and building and building, which does make your deck get bloated over time. And eventually in the game, we would often just like stop buying stuff because who cares at some point? Like the starting cards aren't that bad. And once you've got a whole bunch of really good cards, you might as well just use those. So yeah, just a minor complaint. I wish there was more consistent culling, but that's also a personal preference. Some people like deck builders where you just build and build and build. All right, now how about the actual card play? So you've got 6 characters in the game. As you get to later scenarios, they get unique abilities and stuff. They're generally pretty useful. A lot of them let you help other players, which I appreciate, so the cooperation is pretty good. The starting decks are mostly the same, with some unique cards, but of course, as you deck build, that's going to change up. Now, on your turn, the card play choices are often not that interesting. This is one of those deck builders where you just kind of like throw down your hand and do stuff. I mean, sometimes you'll have cards that let you like draw cards and then discard. Those are more interesting. You can get things like this Avatar State that costs you some hearts to activate, so that's a little bit more engaging. Sometimes you get powers that let you like manipulate how you can purchase cards, but the majority of things are just giving you purpose to buy cards with and attack to defeat enemies with, which isn't terrible because, like I said, often you'll have other ways to use your purpose instead of just buying cards, and you'll have to decide which like enemies you want to focus on. But it's also a pretty basic standard deck builder, so great for families, great for casual people, great for people starting out with deck builders, maybe not so interesting if you're used to more combo-focused, more strategic deck builders. Now, the one thing I do want to call out that I think is friggin' great, it's a really cool system, is how allies interact with these bending cards. So let's say Aang's over here and he can air bend and water bend, but oh no, he can't earth bend. If he purchases an ally that has earth bending themselves, instead of putting it into his discard pile, he can add it straight to his reserve area. And now while this guy's in his reserve, he can gain the benefit from earth bending cards. But then in a really fun gameplay twist, he can at any time on his card be like, never mind, and play the ally from his reserve to resolve his effect. Like maybe he's already used all his earth bending cards, or maybe he's got another earth bending ally He doesn't need this one anymore. So I love this. Even when you purchase them, by the way, you can put them straight into reserve. You don't even have to have the downtime of going through your deck once and drawing into them. It lets characters like Sokka, who clearly has no bending in the show, be able to splash into bending too. It lets people kind of vary up their bending and be able to purchase more of those really powerful cards. Now, it does, again, exacerbate the problem that you're just buying bending cards and not really much else, except for allies to get you into those bending cards. But I think this is a great mechanic. I love things that let you sort of save cards for future turns or use them in other ways. A very clever system and a straightforward deck builder. And again, the cooperation between players is pretty good. You can heal each other. There are a lot of effects that let you give attack or purpose to other players so that their turns will be stronger, give them card draw. Later on, you get these dice, and every result that they give applies to every player in the game. So they're super powerful in 3 and 4 player games. So overall, before we get to the Hogwarts Battle comparison, I would say Aang's Destiny is a lot of fun if you're a fan of the IP and or if you are playing with casual deck builders or families. My kids, my wife, who are fans of the show, have absolutely loved the game. It's just a blast to kind of remember the main moments of the show, to see your favorite characters leveling up. Again, even though the deck building is a little bit straightforward, maybe too straightforward, it does feel fun to get super strong. Is it ever a challenge? Is the game ever really pushing us? Basically never. Except maybe in the final box where they add a whole extra mechanic you have to deal with, but I find that kind of balloons the game time a little bit longer than I prefer. But for what it's going for, a family weight, family-friendly deck builder that is based on a beloved IP, I think it did a good job. But yeah, if you're looking for a really strategic game, if you're looking for a really well-balanced game, if you want to create really cool combos with your cards and have tons of choices on how you play them turn to turn, I don't think this one is going to do much for you. All right, so with that, let's talk about Hogwarts Battle, which is the previous game and used pretty much the exact same mechanics. Now, I will confess, before I talk about this, I have not played Hogwarts Battle in years because I didn't like that game very much. That was one of the first games I did on the channel, and I was pretty down on it. So I did review the rule book and watch my old videos on the game, but I might make comparisons that aren't true because I'm just forgetting things from Hogwarts Battle. So apologize for that. But let's get into it. So the boat replaces what in Hogwarts Battle was a deck of location cards that would also have things kind of advancing left to right. You'd be putting tokens on and then cards could take it off. The big difference there is that with the locations, you couldn't go backwards to a previous location, whereas here, theoretically, if you get a ton of pushback effects, then you could push the boat all the way to the 1 from the 13. I think it's about the same. I really think that both games still have the exact same problem. This is usually not an issue. Now, there are fewer. In Hogwarts Battle, there were tons of cards that pushed back, or at least some very consistent low-cost cards that push back the progress. Here, there aren't as many in the deck, but most of the characters, especially Sokka, if you use him, most of them have very consistent effects to push back the boat, and they do show up on some of the bending cards you'll be buying as well. So it really feels about the same. If they were trying to fix the issues of the previous game, it feels like they didn't really fix this one at all. It still doesn't really have much challenge. And what's very baffling to me is that in Hogwarts Battle, it officially gave you the variant to start with more tokens to advance this faster and get to more negative effects earlier. In this one, for some reason, they don't say that. At least I couldn't find it anywhere in the rules. So technically, you're never supposed to start anywhere except 1. I mean, that's silly, clearly. You could easily start on 5 or 6 or 7 if you wanted the game to be tougher. But like I said, it's going to swing in the other direction if you do. So yeah, this is just still heavily flawed, not any better than what in Hogwarts Battle. Now, these are an entirely new addition from Hogwarts Battle, where you are doing these objectives. Great addition. It makes the theme way stronger. Hogwarts Battle was just fighting people and seeing deck building cards that you know. This makes me feel like I'm playing out the Avatar adventure. So huge improvement. Like I said, the fact that it gives you ways to spend your money resource is really cool. And yes, I love this. I think this brings to life the IP so much stronger. Hogwarts Battle, I never felt like I was doing anything from the Harry Potter stories. I was just hey, there's Nagini. So huge improvement here. Like that a lot. The event cards are almost identical. Most of the effects, I think, are just straight from the Hogwarts Battle game. So not much to comment on there. They were fine in the original thing. Again, I do think the problem that they add more effects and make the boat advance more slowly is a problem. And I think that was also the case in Hogwarts Battle. So meh, whatever. The villains, huge improvement here. Huge. I mean, it's kind of the biggest change overall besides the objectives. They now have in the bottom left a little indication of which scenarios you play with each villain in. So in Hogwarts Battle, if y'all remember, like you would be fighting characters, villains, who died in earlier books in later scenarios, and talk about taking you out of the IP. Like, why am I fighting Professor Quirrell in like book 4 or 5 or 6 or 7? So this does not have that problem. Like Uncle Iroh, you'll see stops being a villain after book 2. That's after the first season of the show. And he is only like either helping you out or staying out of the way for the rest of the time. So there's no like weird thematic disconnect. Now this does, and this is going to be the case for all the other decks in the game, this does mean that if like you're rewinding back, you have to like kind of, figure out which cards go where, and it can take a little bit longer for setup. But this also means, by the way, that you have fewer villains. Hogwarts Battle just added villain on top of villain on top of villain, so the deck got huge and stacked. This here is like almost every villain in the game, but I don't use all those. I just put them all together, and then as I draw, I ignore ones. That's how I'm kind of avoiding the whole annoyance of finding the right numbered cards. Like these ones are only in scenario 1 and 2, so if I had been playing scenario 3, I just would have redrawn. But yeah, so villains, a big improvement. It does still kind of overstay its welcome when you fight too long, but the thematic stuff is here, and the combat takes less time than in Hogwarts Battle, so definitely an improvement there. The market is a huge improvement. Hogwarts Battle, if you didn't know, was notorious for making the market get like clunkily filled up. You would draw a ton of really expensive cards at the beginning and not be able to do anything. That's not happening here. You have so many cards available, especially once you get into the final scenarios with fire. And that whole cool stacking mechanic means that you have even more options and things don't get muddled up. Hogwarts Battle had to add, I think, an official variant where you could like move everything out of the market once and redraw. But even then, it still might get full of stuff you don't want. So here, that has never been a problem. We have never not had something we were interested in buying. So big improvement there over Hogwarts Battle. That being said, Hogwarts Battle had cards that were way better than others. I think that problem is even worse here with the bending cards. This is mostly what you're going to buy. So it's not a full great improvement, but so be it. As for the actual like play of the cards, nothing's really changed here. They just added that reserve mechanic that I mentioned. And I think that is a really cool addition, a really cool bonus. I also think playing the bending cards is fun because they're so powerful. Again, kind of brokenly powerful. But yeah, I think the card play is almost identical to Hogwarts Battle, except I do like the ally reserve mechanic. I think that's a great addition. And then while I wouldn't full on spoil it, there is a special mechanic that makes the boss a little different in box 7, just like there was in box 7 of Harry Potter. And just like that box 7, I don't really love this one. It just makes the game take, I think, a little bit too long for what's already, by the time you get to box 7, kind of overstaying its welcome as a game. So yeah, that's a minor point you can enjoy a lot. And the rules do officially say in box 7, they're like, hey, if you don't want to play with this, just don't. Leave that mechanic out. So I appreciate that. We certainly did as my family after the first try. But yeah, I think overall, this is a big improvement on Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. The market is better. The thematics and like the IP usage is a million times better. Really like the objectives to walk you through the seasons and the story. But this, which is one of the biggest issues in the original game, has not been fixed at all, in my opinion. It's just as bad. And again, they've introduced some new problems with kind of obviousness of what you should deck build and sort of boring combos in the game. But yeah, if you're going to pick up one of the two, absolutely get Aang's Destiny. That's not even a question in my mind, unless the people you're playing with adore Harry Potter and hate Avatar: The Last Airbender. But if those are the people you're playing with, you shouldn't be friends with them anymore because they have bad taste. All right, that's it, everyone. Thanks for watching. Good gaming, and we'll see you at the next stop.